Well, there was a big fight in California to determine who would succeed Kamala Harris. Black politicians in the state wanted a black person to succeed her. Hispanic politicians wanted a Hispanic person to succeed her. Ultimately, the governor chose a Hispanic person to succeed her because, after all, the state is 40% Hispanic and roughly 9% black. But as far as the quality of education for inner city blacks and Hispanics are concerned, let me quote a former Secretary of State.
What difference at this point does it make?
I think it's a good time to ask of our friends in the Identity Party, has having a black politician or a Hispanic politician left wing in charge made a bit of difference in the quality of education for urban blacks and for urban Hispanics? This is from edresource.org. The study, The Majority Report Supporting the Success of Latino Students in California, found that in every California county, a majority of Latino students were not proficient in math or English language arts. By comparison, a majority of white students scored proficient in English language arts in more than 40 counties and in math in more than 20 counties, end of quote. And as far as black students are concerned, I quote from the black newspaper, the Los Angeles Sentinel. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine if only 1 in 6 African American students in an entire state could read at grade level. Imagine if fewer than 1 in 5 Latino students were performing at grade level in math. Imagine if less than 1/3 of students were proficient in either subject. Would you be outraged? Wake up. This is the reality of California public education in 2018. The results from the most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress paint a disturbing picture. California schools are failing the vast majority of students, end of quote. And note to Kamala Harris and to the incoming Hispanic senator, that's a majority of California students failing. Not just a majority of black or Hispanic, a majority of California students are failing. In 4th and 8th grade math and reading, California once again falls near the bottom of the nation. 8th grade girls rank 41st in math, Latino 8th graders rank 43rd in reading, low-income 4th graders rank 50th in math, and low-income students represent nearly 60% of California's K-12 enrollment, end of quote. Will having a empathetic, woke, black politician mean that public education, K-12, is going to get any better? Well, this has been put to the test. In the mid to late 90s, there was a politician in Illinois named State Senator Barack Obama. He teamed up with Bill Ayers, an educator, to spend $100 million from the so-called Annenberg Challenge to improve K-12 public education in Chicago. By their own estimation, they failed. Rather than fund the schools directly, they teamed up with external partners who focused on political radicalism. External partners, that focused on math or science were turned down. And the challenge instead funded groups like ACORN, or South Shore African Village Collaborative, and the Dual Language Exchange, which focused on, get this, Afrocentricity, anti-capitalism, political consciousness, and bilingualism. And the result, again, here's their own report card. There were no statistically significant differences in student achievement between Annenberg schools and demographically similar non-Annenberg schools. This indicates that there was no Annenberg effect on achievement, end of quote. You see, people like Kamala Harris believe it's about the money. If only we could spend more money K-12, we'd have outstanding BAFO results. Well, this too has been put to the test. 1985, because of historical discrimination, a federal district judge ordered that school district to spend $2 billion to improve education for minorities in that city. And boy, did they spend.
The court ordered a remedial plan, described as the most ambitious and expensive remedial plan in history, grew to cost more than the school district's operating budget and eventually more than the district could legally collect in taxes.
I jotted down a few of the things on which they spent some of that $2 billion. The district built 15 new schools, equipped dozens of magnet schools with equipment and personnel for state-of-the-art academic, athletic, and arts programs. One elementary school offered private Suzuki violin lessons for every student. A middle school hired 10 resource teachers to develop projects in specialty subjects. Kansas City added a Montessori kindergarten and a first grade Spanish immersion program. Some teachers got raises, private Suzuki lessons, and 6 diving boards. And 15 years after this $2 billion spending spree, what happened? The Kansas City School District failed all of Missouri's 11 academic performance standards and became the first big city school district to lose its academic accreditation. All that spending managed to attract several hundred white suburban students in the early 1990s, but many later left.
But by 1995, the district had little to show for the expenditures in terms of improving scores. Missouri authorizes the creation of charter schools in 1998. By 1999, the Kansas City School District couldn't meet even one of the academic performance standards and lost accreditation.
Now, public education in Kansas City appears to have improved a bit, and one of the reasons is because of the limited, and I mean limited, K-12 choice program that they have, a program that Democrats like Kamala Harris oppose.
I'd like you to meet Jalen Cruz. He's a third grade student at Urban Preparatory Academy in Wichita. Jalen came to Urban Prep after 2 years in the public school system, and he arrived with behavior problems, low personal self-esteem, and perhaps not coincidentally, a low reading score. He tested in only the 24th percentile in reading nationwide. Now, less than a year later, he's in the 78th percentile in reading and math. He's made a lot of new friends, and he even has a great career goal. He wants to be like Pastor Wade Moore, the headmaster at Urban Prep. Now, Jalen is unfortunately a rare exception. You see, he's only able to attend Urban Prep because of a tax credit scholarship. That's the only school choice program available to low-income families in Kansas. And without this program, Jalen would still be among the tens of thousands of students who are left behind every year.
You know, some of these woke progressive teachers don't send their own school-age kids K-12 to public school. In Philadelphia, 44% of public school teachers who have school-age kids send their own kids to private school. Here's what Bill de Blasio said the mission of education is all about.
We needed to profoundly change the distribution of resources. I like to say very bluntly, our mission is to redistribute wealth. A lot of people bristle at that phrase. That is, in fact, the phrase we need to use. We have been doing this work for 7 years to more equitably redistribute resources throughout our school system. That means pre-K for all, 3K for all, advanced placement courses.
Also, left-wing people like Kamala Harris will tell you, well, it's because of discrimination that the urban school districts are getting the shaft compared to suburban school districts. After all, urban school districts get less money per pupil, don't they? Well, not according to the liberal Brookings institution. We find that on average, poor and minority students receive 1% to 2% more resources than non-poor or white students in their districts, equivalent to about $65 per pupil, end of quote. Again, this is the liberal think tank, the Brookings Institution. We hypothesized that wealthier districts would under-allocate resources to poor and minority students. We reasoned that parents with greater resources could more effectively navigate the local political system, making it easier to secure a greater share of school spending for their children. Reasoning similarly, we also expected to find that in districts with greater income inequality and segregation, poor and minority students would receive a smaller share of school resources. In many cases, however, we find just the opposite, end of quote. Brookings was shocked. Another sacred systemic racism left-wing canard has been shattered. In richer districts, poor and Hispanic students receive more school resources relative to their non-poor and white peers in the same districts. Districts with more school segregation, whether socioeconomic or racial, tend to spend more on poor and minority students relative to non-poor and white students, end of quote. Again, they always think it's about money.
And again, what we see is less than a quarter of the low-income students are on track to be college and career ready, and less than half of the students in the local districts and across the state, less than half of those who are not low income are on track to be college and career ready. Now, these results may be somewhat hard to believe, I get that, but they're borne out by what we find on the ACT exam, where we find that only 32% of Kansas students are college ready in English, reading, math, and science. And while ACT does not provide income breakouts, we can see that there are still very large achievement gaps between African American students, Hispanic students, and white students in Kansas. Now, this has all happened. The achievement has flatlined and the gaps have gotten wider, while at the same time we've seen very large funding increases in Kansas. The per pupil spending last year was $13,124 on average, and over the lifespan of the old school funding system, that's a 45% increase above inflation. This study from Cato by the late Andrew Colson found that since 1970, school spending adjusted for inflation has nearly tripled, and yet outcomes for 17-year-olds are basically flat.
Democrats, of course, are adamantly opposed to true school choice.
Now, the proposal that I brought forth on education ends all private charter schools in this country.
Tell that to Arkansas educator Patrick Wolf, who's analyzed school choice programs all over the country.
What we're seeing pretty strong evidence that school vouchers have positive effects on educational attainment. That's how far students go in school. So here in Milwaukee, we saw that the voucher students graduated from high school at a rate 4 to 7 percentage points higher than similar MPS students. They enrolled in college at a rate 4 to 7 percentage points higher, which is a big deal because only about 25% of these students go to college. So a 4 to 7 percentage point difference, that's like a 20% difference.
One more time, it ain't about the money. Do you remember Chicago's Marva Collins?
There are no frills at West Side. The emphasis is on basic education, with an even stronger emphasis on literature and composition. There are no teacher breaks, no teacher desks. She is on her feet and over their shoulders all day, pushing them, cajoling them, and praising them.
Very, very good, Lisa. Very, very good. Cum laude.
And the results are apparent even to a casual bystander. Alert and challenged children being pushed way beyond the boundaries most school systems set.
So, in summary, whether Kamala Harris is replaced by a black senator or a Hispanic senator, as far as the quality of K-12 education is concerned in urban areas,
What difference at this point does it make?
I'm Larry Elder, and we have a state of California to save. See you next time.